Okay. Um, I want to thank you all for joining us on Wanda's Picks podcast. And we're going to be talking about your panel discussion this weekend at the 11th annual Bay Area Book Festival, which is really exciting. It's going to be on Saturday, and it's going to be hosted um, uh, by Claude Marks, Freedom Archives. And I was really excited to be speaking with, the children of Russel Maroon Shoatz. And of course, you can call your mother's names because they were there and they're really important to the story as well, and definitely important to um, your lives and how you ended up, growing into the adult people that you are. And so I'm going to read your bios first, and then I'm going to let you share with our audience a little bit about who your father is and why he is important to our collective history in this nation. Particularly, we're talking about people of African descent, people devoted to freedom and justice and equality. And he's an ancestor now, Shay, but I'm really happy that you were able to bring him home. We don't want any of our
Yes,
folks
yes,
dying behind bars. That is the worst death,
yes, yes, yes.
absolutely the worst death. So we'll start with you, Russell Schultz the third, and you were born on May 7th, so you just had a birthday. Happy
Mhm.
birthday. In 1967 to Thelma Christian and Russell Schultz Jr. You are well versed in a multitude of healing modalities, and I hope you'll tell us about those because as Black folks, we can use all the tools we can help, we can assess, and restorative justice equity practices. Russell has lived a life of unique complexities that are the sum total of resilience. His father, a Black Panther, was imprisoned in 1972, and you championed the campaign to free your father, who was incarcerated for, I believe, 50 years, and 20 of those were in solitary confinement. And it was a real, wow, the story that he tells is like one of brutality. If one can imagine, which we can't, what enslavement was for our ancestors, um, I guess a close second is what's continuing to happen to our brothers and sisters who are locked up behind bars, specifically those who are political prisoners and prisoners of war. And Sharon Schultz, you're the daughter, the
Mhm,
sister of this
mhm,
this man here who's with us now.
mhm,
You're the
mhm,
daughter of Russell Maroon Schultz, and you're a retired New York City educator.
mhm,
Could you tell us about that?
mhm,
Active member within the Panther Cubs and an
mhm,
advocate for the release and freedom of all political prisoners and
mhm,
prisoners of war.
mhm.
And I was thinking, why don't we just take a moment of silence because, for all of those brothers and sisters um, who gave, as they call it, ultimate sacrifice, gave their lives for the liberation of our people. So why don't we take a moment of silence and just do a collective ashe for them? So I I listened to the book. I like listening to books now that I'm older.
So
They
do I.
save my eyes, and the
Mhm.
narrator, he's really good.
Yeah.
And the
Mhm.
book is so different from the collection of essays. It's like a real book. I mean, like it's
Mhm.
the story.
Mhm.
And wow, it was parts of it were heck of hard.
Mhm.
I mean, it was heck of hard to get through. I'm like, okay, well,
Yeah.
because I mean, I read some memoirs like this, not like this, but where,
Mhm.
oh Lord, it just
Mhm.
it takes a while to get to the enlightenment part.
Mhm.
And while you're going through that, it's like, oh man, it's just hard. It's hard,
Yeah.
but it was hard growing up
Yeah.
at that time. I mean, it's not easy now, you know. And we're grown people, so I can't imagine what, the children are going through. I've got grandchildren, I've got a great grandson, and I just think like, oh, it's, that's why, what you're doing, the work that you're doing is so important because it's not historic. It's
All
now.
right.
It's
All
like it's
right.
not history. It's now.
All right.
Like we have so many people incarcerated now, it's not even funny. I mean, and it's like slave catchers. How do you keep your children safe? How do you keep them free? And yeah, and I think communication is really important. And your father talks about that, how, you know, parents weren't talking to children, husbands weren't speaking to wives, community members were not speaking to each other, they were fighting and at war with each other. And in the meantime, you know, um, the dominant system was just going crazy, um, it just furthered the plan for our decimation. The plan seems to be decimation, like, Black folks as free beings, happy beings. It doesn't seem to be something that just happens, it's something that we have to work at keeping in front of us. And so I was just wondering if you could talk a little bit about um, you know, being Shoatz children.
Yeah.
Like this
Yeah.
legacy that you are carrying intentionally, because you didn't have to pick it up.
All right.
This is
Yeah.
a choice. This is a
Yeah.
choice. You chose to do this. So why? I mean,
Mm.
obviously you must love the people because because you don't do this kind of thing just because. I mean, you probably a lot of thought went into this, I'm
Yeah.
sure.
It
Well,
don't it, it, it don't it don't it don't it,
initially,
it, it it don't pay a lot.
yeah. And initially, I think for me, it starts out as that connection with your parents. I think for all of us, that undying connection for your either mother or father, and in this instance, it was our father. But I think, as children, we've witnessed firsthand, you know, this country's oppressive and systematic efforts to, wage a war against resistance. And my father, as I was growing up, for me, again, it was just initially to be his daughter, But I think when I moved to New York in 1990, it became much more for me. I think meeting those Panthers and BLA members, those sheroes and heroes of the movement right in New York City, there to touch and talk and dialogue, and for them to be that resource to me, opened me up more. These people knew my father. I never knew my father but behind bars. So I leaned into those stories, and I also learned a lot about, oppressive states and, resilience and what that fight was really about. So I think as a child, more so, it was more, the father daughter connection. I mean, of course, he escaped a couple of times. So that made it a whole different dynamic, of course. But I think as I got older, I was able to make those other connections because I'm living in two worlds. I'm living in this world of capitalism, and I'm also living in this world of, oppressive systems that we live in under racial conditions. So, I
Mhm.
don't know if I'm going off subject. You need to go on,
Yeah.
or Russ, I don't know if I answered for you. But yeah, so I think being a children is, it's a lot, We have that legacy that we have to think about. Is that something we want to carry on? Is that something we want to continuously fight for? And I think as long as you have oppressive systems, you have to continue to fight and wage
Right.
that resilience.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I agree. I agree.
Yeah. So continue in your agreement, Russell. Like how do you agree with your sister? and, and talk about, sort of, I mean, this is your father and you're in court. I think from the book, seeing him sentenced and the only, I mean, he didn't have contact visits. So, you're a child, both of you are children, and your father, I mean, you did know him before, but you were even younger. Um, and so not having, that physical contact, that everyday contact, like when you come home from school, there's your father. No. And like you said, your father, he did escape. That was pretty, that could be like a movie. That was like, oh my God, really? Like you did this and you did that. I mean, yeah, I mean, not just once, but 3 times. And yeah, that was pretty. I mean, this is not fiction. This is like really
Real
happened.
life, right, right.
Like, whoa. And then yeah, it was like, yeah, it's pretty remarkable. And I can't imagine what it was like on the ground.
Yeah, yeah.
And and people hear about Philadelphia, which used to be, it was the first capital of this nation. And in Philadelphia, um, it has some pretty oppressive history, so far as, the dominant culture, but for African people, it's amazing. I mean, the first colored convention started there. We got like the spiritualist community started to move, happened there. And then Rizzo, like you think like he is like his own dynasty. Horrible. I mean, I didn't know about the police department stuff. And then
That
you
that's where I would like to jump in, um,
sure.
because you did a great job there of giving a kind of briefing around Philadelphia. But I think a lot of the Philadelphia history and culture, that first black, structuring of a um, kind of contract for us, a coming together, to put together a constitution, a movement constitution. That was revolutionary. That happened, but also, parts of the Underground Railroad. But bringing it up, to Rizzo and this Commonwealth, kind of there's a spirit with that also, the whole Commonwealth spirit, it going back to the 1700s. But this repression that has been kind of consistent all the way, it's very consistent in Pennsylvania and Philadelphia, the the oppression, all the way up to Rizzo, that intersects with the police state growing and getting institutionalized. And so Rizzo is really important for political study around the institutionalization, of police violence in the way that it looks today. It can't look the way it looks today without Rizzo. These people doing the stuff they doing, all the people, all of the um, mayors and governors that have iron fists and they're repressive, and they come out with these talking points about what they're going to do in order to bring law and justice and law and order, that whole law and order style of iron fist, velvet glove technique, was honed by Rizzo. You know, you couldn't have it without Rizzo first. They learned from Rizzo. Giuliani learned from Rizzo how to turn New York into a police state. He learned that from Rizzo. They learned from Rizzo how to go over to Israel and train over there with Israeli, military and police, and how to synthesize and come together with ideologies and ideas around policing for the state. You can't have Cop City without Rizzo, because these are the underpinnings of Cop City. And so I want to bring that. Pennsylvania is so pivotal in that way. You can't have juvenile lifers without Pennsylvania, without Rizzo. You know, he's the institutionalized person that's saying we'll lock you up forever and throw away the key, and there are no paroles. We locking people up and we institutionalize that. Pennsylvania has more of that than any state, period. Hands down. We've locked up people forever, better than anyone else in the whole. So this whole 2 million people, 2 millions of people locked up in the United States, it ties back to Pennsylvania. It ties back to institutionalization of incarceration of Africans.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. Sharon, do you want to add anything to this?
No, I think, Rizzo was a domineering force in Philadelphia for too long, many years, from being a police commissioner to then the mayor. And we know that, altercation he had with Move. We know the altercation he had with the Black Panthers. We know that Rizzo was everything my brother just laid out. And, that history does lend itself to the policing we see today, like Cop City, and, the outrageous way in which people of color are treated by police. So, yeah.
Yeah, I was I was thinking when your brother was speaking about the whole idea of a penitentiary was also born in Philadelphia, that the whole thing around penitence, and how people needed to have time to think about whatever they did that law enforcement didn't like, or the dominant, structure government didn't like. So they isolated people and put them in solitary confinement so they could reflect on their wrongs. And it was, cruel and unusual punishment. So, so for a Maroon to come out of that particular type of environment, because your daddy was no joke. He was like a warrior to the very end, using, not only using arms and knowing how to use arms, but sort of training his body so that his body could be a tool of resistance, like military, martial arts, and then train, of course, training his mind. And as he got older and older, and also because of the imposed time that he had to do self-reflection, we see how in the story how he becomes he's able to sort of address some of these areas of his own psyche that he had been ignoring because he didn't have time to think about it because it was about survival. I mean, when I read those things about what was happening in the gang culture, that was like heck of brutal. I mean, oh my goodness. I mean, it was brutal for the perpetrator and was brutal for the recipient, and you always, wasn't like you weren't on both ends of the same thing at the same time. Like there wasn't, there was no winning, so to speak. Like there was no good part to that. It was just more like survival and dominance.
And I think that lends itself back to the whole our history of slavery and the fact that the rites of passage for Black men during that time in Philadelphia was gangs, because they weren't allowed to even learn and know who they were as, kings, from a dynasty, because slavery had taken all of that away. And I think as part of that gang life, like you said, it was brutal. It was like, survival for the fittest, And so, yeah, I agree with you. It was just, a lot that he went through before he came to the, realization that a lot of this machivo, the matriarchal, the patriarchal, thing was not necessarily correct. And, it took him a while to get to that, but I'm glad he got to it because, I'm a woman. My mother's a woman, you know what I'm saying? And it's a lot that she endured, with her interaction with him and then without him raising us by herself. So for that, a lot of men, and for him to admit it, and to write it, and that's, brutal. And when you say it was brutal for you reading it, can you imagine how it was for me? And I had to, read the edits and I think every time I read the book now, I'm emotional because, it's the, people are saying it's the delayed grief, it's delayed trauma, it's a lot coming out of me. And so, yeah, it's been many decades that we fought for him. And like you said, at least he was freed in the end and he was able to be around family, friends, and comrades as opposed to dying, in prison.
Yeah, yeah.
One of the things I would like to add quickly there is that the community movement wise, through my father and his style, part of his style is to be constantly kind of learning and moving on the run. So you asked about maroon culture, and some of that maroon culture is, if you're a maroon, then you don't get a chance to, for lack of better terms, make mistakes. You make mistakes, but you correct them right on in the fly, like praxis style, and he was perfect in that way. He would break out, and in the middle of the breakout, everything got to change and switch up, and oh, they figured this out or whatever it may be, and he's constantly changing and switching up all the way down to ideologies, and people get married to their ideologies. I'm this, I'm that, blah blah blah, and he was a master of like pivoting, like just pivot on, and you're like, well, Maroon, you've been telling us this, that, and the other. You were saying it's just that. He's like, I don't care, it ain't that no more. We doing this now. And it's like, well, yeah, my whole emotional and everything is tied to these ideologies or whatever. Well, the praxis is telling us, or whatever's telling us, that, we can't go that route anymore. We have to go this route now. And that is a mystique of Maroon that is really powerful. And I think people miss it a lot, just in engaging with him in the book. He talks about it. He shows that he does it, in his everyday life. He's constantly kind of changing and being like, oh yeah, my fault. I was wrong actually on that. And now we got to go this way, which is, even in my own personal life, it's not the easiest thing to do, to admit, actually, I've been feeding you this Kool-Aid and you've been drinking this Kool-Aid for 20 years. Actually, it's not Kool-Aid. It's something else. And I was wrong. I thought it was Kool-Aid too. So stop drinking that Kool-Aid. And here's another cup of some stuff. It's red and cherry flavor like that other stuff. But this is what we're going with now. And you would have to be okay with, well, wait a minute. But it's 20 years of you saying X, Y, and Z. Like, well, I've just come to recognize that those ideas and ideologies that I've been putting forth aren't the right ideas. They aren't the right ideologies. And so I apologize, but I'm going this way. If you like that or you resonate with what I'm explaining to you, then please come with me this way. If you don't, I totally understand, that you and so one of the ways that looked like is my dad was always a Muslim, and the way that he deemed obviously looked different once he recognized that he was terminally ill. And so that terminal illness brought about an Islam in him that nobody had ever seen before, a fundamental Islam that people hadn't seen before. Maroon wasn't the one to be like, oh, I don't take pictures and I don't do this, and you got to make sure that you make every salah every day. That wasn't his style of Islam. But in preparing for transition and preparing to die, then he immediately changed his way of being and incorporated that and asked everybody, did they want to be Muslim?
Yeah, yeah. And and I don't know, I was just thinking about, Muslim, and being a submitter, and how, some people believe that we're all Muslim by nature because we all like the plants turn toward the sun just naturally for light and energy. If we see the creator as sun, light, life-giving energy, then as people, as spirit having a human expression, we turn toward that kind of light too, no matter whether we call it Muslim or Islam or Christianity or Buddhism or nothing. We just roll like that. Um, so yeah, yeah. So I was just thinking about that when you said what you just said. Um, so do you want to share something uh from your father's book, Russell, that sort of speaks to um your father's changing, because that's what strategists do, in a war, in a battle. You don't have time all the time to like get together and have these long meetings because you want to live. So you got to be fast. And I also know that he shared power. It wasn't about all about him. It was about who had the tools to be able to get the group to the next move, to the next place, which was ultimately liberation and freedom. That was always the goal, liberation and freedom. And it was like people talk about freedom as a constant struggle. When you read the book, it's like it really is like it really is all the way to the very end. And then after that, because death is not the end of anything. And after that, like you are your father, and people who read the work, and I think about Fred Ho, and his work, and I met him and spoke to him, and the people who are like in the book, giving the afterword and the forwards, and like you mentioned, um, Sharon, meeting people that knew your dad, like they were like his partners and his comrades, and they can tell you stories you weren't born yet, like tell you some stuff so you could really know the man, that whose name you carry and who walks in your person, in your genes and in your blood and in your flesh, because as long as you live, he lives.
Exactly. Yeah,
And then after that too.
that's
So
right.
yeah. So Russell, you found something you want to share? I know what I asked for, but whatever you're feeling called to share is fine with me. I was
No,
just thinking,
no, I want to stay focused on your questions because I thought they were good.
no, no, no. I want you to share something so we could hear your father's voice. Like, what's his answer? You were talking about how he was strategic, like, okay, this is not working anymore. I got to do something else. I know my father used to always say something like freeze on it, and until I he talked about going into a deep freeze around his emotions. And I'm like, whoa.
Yeah, he was a very complex person. We always say very
Yeah.
super complex. Had a lot of
Uh-huh.
different size and angles, and you could never kind of box him in because he was just unboxable in that way. He would always find ways to sneak in and out, like straight jacket Houdini style type of person. You could never box him in. He would come
Hmm.
up with ideas, ideologies, conversations, or whatever that would unbox him. He was unchained for real.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, part of his mystique is just being a person um, who thinks outside of the box and isn't afraid to actually take a chance on an idea that's actually unproven.
Hmm.
Like it's not proven that you're going to get over this wall into freedom. And you have to take it just some chance in between. There's no knowing of these things per se that Maroon is constantly saying to himself, I can do it. I can make it. It's possible. It's doable. Well, it's never been done before. It's doable. It's doable. And that's a constant of his. And I'm sure there have been people, comrades. I've met some of them. Some of them have come home from prison. Some are juvenile lifers that like Yeah, your dad was on some, I couldn't rock with it all. I couldn't do it all. I was supposed to be part of this escape attempt, but then it got to a certain point where I was, whatever it may be, or I became more of a support or a lookout or whatever it may be, because things, elevate and change and have always been that way. It happened with me, with my father trying to put together cells to liberate him. And he would just, there was a assuredness of him about what was actually necessary to liberate himself. He actually knew internally within himself. And if you came to him with a plan that was short of that, like, yo, we coming to get you. We got this, we got that, we got the arms, we got the weapons, we got the vehicles, we got the transportation, we got the money, and he'll be like, no, you don't have the organization though. You're not organized enough, or whatever it may be. Okay, we got now we organized. So you check that, check all the dots, you check our I's and T's. Yeah, y'all organized now, but you don't have administrative power. Like, I want in our cell, we need an administrative person who's super tight, who can not be on the site with us doing the escape, but administering it. Being the person at the computer, being like, oh yeah, oh, the credit cards didn't work or whatever. Okay, we got some. Oh, y'all passports ain't whatever. Oh, okay, we got that. Y'all don't have that. So go back to the drawing board. And I'll be like, bro, are you serious? You actually don't want to be liberated. You're like, no, you actually want to die.
Yeah. So, while Russell is finding something in the book to share.
Is he gonna read? Does he have it? Russell?
You're muted.
I'm muted?
Oh, my apologies. My apologies. I do not have the book in front of me. My sister will actually be forced to give you a excerpt from the book.
Oh, no, we're not going to do that. So we'll pass on that. No, we're not going to do that to Sharon. That's okay. People will just have to get the book. Because
I apologize. I don't have the book in front of me. I apologize.
Oh, no problem. No problem.
Okay.
That's more incentive for people to get the book. And at the book festival, that's what you do. You get books. So people bring your change and get the book. Yeah, and like I said, you can even you can listen to it. And it's a very good listen. How many hours was it? I can't remember, because I know I would check in with you. I was like, okay, I got 10 more to go.
10 more now.
I mean, I got 8 more to go. And I decided, well, you can't say I've got 6, I've got 4, I've got 1. I'm here because I finished it at almost midnight. And I'm like, oh, they are sleeping because they're 3 hours ahead of me.
That's right.
So I'm like, sorry about that. Yeah, but it's it's like there's a lot of cinematic quality to it, because there's all this action. It's a real action-packed story. I mean, literally, it's like you're sitting on your seat like, oh my God, what's gonna happen? Are they gonna make it? Oh, will he live through this beating? Oh my God, it's like, oh, it's terrible. It's absolutely terrible what happens to and I'm so happy he's so graphic about that, because people don't believe that that we have political prisoners and prisoners of war in this country. But just in general, everyone is not necessarily a political prisoner, but our prisons are not about rehabilitation. They're about punishment, serious punishment. I mean, it's terrible. If the administration is not hurting you, other people that are also locked up, they have no power, are also hurting you. It's just a horrible situation.
And you can imagine.
There's so many people in prison now. It's like crazy.
And can you imagine? My father talks about that, when he first got there, he talks about the numbers in the book, how low they were, and now we see that we're the number 1 country with the number 1 prison inmates. So
yeah,
I think, then you have to look at what that does to the families,
Yes.
And way back when we, 30 plus years, The phone calls was $15. You know, it was a racket. It's always been a racket, you know, for the money, for people to make money off of it. And so, yeah, as families, we struggle just to get up there, to visit, to send money, to do phone calls, the entire gamut. You know, it's a strain on families. So we have to stay true, as Maroon stayed true to his freedom and resilience, whether it was freedom here or it was out when he was trying to get that freedom, you know, outside the walls.
I want to touch on real quick that as a child of a dissident or child of a political prisoner, child of a Panther BLA member, that you have to constantly um, beg the question of how do you take your life experiences and integrate them or not? Do you accept your father's, mother's work, and do you want to further it or not? And then there's a lot of pressure a lot of times for people, for you to be your parent, to be Maroon or to be Asada or to be Fred or whatever, but you're not Fred. You're not Asada. You're not Maroon. You're actually their offspring and their seed. Now, what do you bring to the table? And not just in the context of movement work. What do you bring to the table as an individual? You may not be in movement work at all, or it may not look like you're in movement work, but the life that you have had as a child may turn out that way, or you may produce things that have social impact without even consciously trying to. And so these are things that I've witnessed, in my experience dealing with people who have been affected by, state influence.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah. So Russell, answer your own question. What do you do? What do you choose? I mean, as a child, you have no power, you have no choice. But as you grow up, as a grown person, you can choose to be involved or not be involved. But you chose to be involved because, your bio says that, you're doing all this, you know, work around sort of being healthy despite the
So
trauma.
so so yes. So the health aspect of the social justice, the piece that I learned from my father is he was always working out, and he was always about, when I escape, I got to be able to run XYZ of miles. I got to be able to do this and do that. But there's also some spiritual health that we've gained from him also. And I think one of the most important things that I've learned health wise from my father is to make sure that I'm taking care of me. I got to put my mask on first on the airplane before I try to help somebody else. So that self work, that Maroon being tight and making sure that he's the best person. What you're experiencing in the book is Maroon being cathartic and saying, these are my shortcomings. I'm going to tell them to you. I'm going to list them to you so you can see me in my rawest form. Don't, yeah, you got me on a pedestal, Maroon, and all of that stuff. That's great. Yes, that too, right? But also look at me. I'm a human being. Real things happen. I had to do this. I was a womanizer. I was an abuser. I was and I had to work through and fight through that to not be abuser, to be a man who holds up women, to teach other men to hold up women. That was a process. Again, it started this way, drinking this Kool-Aid, then it come with this Kool-Aid. And it's like, well, which one? Oh, it's this one for sure. I'm for sure you're supposed to be treating women like this. I'm guaranteeing you this one. And so that level of work and that level of growth and knowledge and challenging of self, the knowledge of self. The real revolution is knowledge of self. The real revolution is internal. Because when you bring your broken self to the movement with all your broken schisms and all, which is part of it, we accept you, because that's what the movement. We don't turn nobody away in this movement. There's no closed door in the movement, but we need your best self. We need the highest level of you. We don't need your lower nature. We don't need you here abusing people and doing the things that you do. We've seen it in Maroon's work. He's telling you, don't come like this if you can avoid it. If you can't avoid it, come. But try to come with your best self. And some of that is just work on self. doing work on self, getting to know yourself better, and so we have programs that work with that my dad put out. One of them is his prisoners brunch, and that is telling prisoners, organize your family like I organize my family. It's telling the family, find somebody in prison. Everybody in this whole country got somebody in prison, or they know somebody in prison, especially if you black. If you black and you're not doing no prison work, there's no reason. There's no reason for you not to be engaged in prison work, because you know somebody in prison, whether they wrong or right or whatever you want to, whatever, somebody in prison. Do some work around them. Know that the system is not correct. It's not fair. It's not just. It's not, you can say, oh, well, you did the crime, you just got to do the time. It actually is a little more complicated than that. And so that level and that style of work is important now. And I think, my dad's programming, the Prunch, the Curb Fest, these are programs that, for lack of a better term, make you work, make you challenge yourself. Curb Fest, you got to organize with people. You got to go to your neighbors. You can't just throw a Curb Fest without knocking on the door and saying, hey, we about to have the music up. Old lady that usually calls the cop on us, we about to have the music up. What do you need? That's a core piece of Curb Fest. That's a core piece of my dad, making sure that you go and have the uncomfortable conversation. My dad about the uncomfortable conversation. He's about that life. He liked the uncomfortable conversation. He's gonna have it with you. It may be whatever. You might not like what he say, but he's not gonna avoid and duck the uncomfortable conversation.
What's a Curb Fest? Curb Fest? What's that? You're muted.
Curb Fest is a praxis tool and an organizing tool to liberate our political prisoners. So what Curb Fest looks like, it can look like just a table with flyers and posters that we provide, and you just handing out information and talking to your neighbors and saying, this is a Curb Fest. I'm on a curb with my table, and it's a festival. I'm giving out information about these people who you should know. If you don't know Imam Jamil, if you don't know H. Rap Brown, if you don't know Mumia, if you don't know, we're here to introduce you to these people who fought for you to have the right to just walk down the street and not get beat by the police. Did you know that? These are the people who set that up so that we just every day aren't getting bopped upside the head.
Okay. Any other organizations? Sharon, you want to share that that you all are a part of? Because I know you're an educator, a retired educator. And I know your father created some programs when he was free. Educational programs, political education, which included education. He was a part of, there was a community center in Philadelphia that taught people about their Black heritage. And he, for the first time, was proud to be a person of African descent because he had known the history. And I don't know if that was a time when he chose an African name, but he started thinking about how he had participated in the system of oppression against his own people because, that was the model until he was able to stop that.
Yeah, that was another one of his turning points, the Kool-Aid that he had drunk before with gang life. And then he found that, he then found that African Center in West Philly, and he did change his name and he became more conscious about the rights and wrongs of his deeds and his doings in his community, which propelled him forward with the Black Unity Council, and coming together to support his community in a more conscious social way that he had never done before. So as far as with me, I'm more, prior to retiring, was just committed to the freedom of my father and other political prisoners. Now in retirement, I'm committed to more of political prisoners, of course, in their freedom.
Excuse me, Sharon, before you continue, your brother's got to jump off, so I wanted to give you an opportunity to say something to him.
Yeah, we both got to jump off.
Actually, you both got to jump off. Oh,
yeah. I don't know how you want to wrap this up, but yeah. So my brother basically.
I like to wrap it up with your letting people know how they can be in touch with you, because the Curb Fest sounds like something that everybody could do, but I was wondering, like, do you have a website or a way that people
Yes,
can be plugged into, the different work that you're doing around
yes,
freeing our
yes,
political prisoners and also around, sort of being a part of their lives, because
yes,
once behind bars, the people that are doing well are those that have advocacy, because
Yeah,
yes,
well,
yes,
yeah, well, he can
yes. So
definitely give
definitely.
you that information, and I can just give you the information for Instagram. I am Maroon for the book. All right, Russ, go ahead.
Yes, and for us directly, we're in a tech struggle right now. We're promoting a tech fast. We're promoting phone fast for the children in Congo. But please contact us directly, rshokes at gmail, but also go to our social media and go to curbfest.com if you're interested in Curbfest. And also, again, rshokes at gmail. That's RSHOAT as in Tom, Z as in Zebra. My first initial, my last name at Gmail. Please contact us. We have Maroon Camp coming up this summer. We have the brunch coming up, and we also have Curbfest. So reach out to us via Curbfest, via I Am Maroon, Instagram, or by rshokes at gmail.com.
Okay. And do you think that maybe you could email me, about
Yes,
the those events that you mentioned?
sure will.
Yeah, that would be super. And then I could post those.
Yep, yep.
Okay,
We'll
good.
Okay, well,
do. We'll
safe
hit you with.
travels coming this way to Berkeley this weekend, Saturday, May 31st, 12:30 to 1:30 p.m. You will be at Freight and Salvage
Yes,
discussing unyielding resistance perspectives on political prisoners and the lifelong pursuit of freedom, moderated by Claude Marks. And you'll be in conversation with another person who is also doing this kind of work.
the great
So it's
Claude
gonna,
Marks and Brother Garrett. Great Claude
Yeah,
Marks and
yeah.
Brother Garrett. Thank you so much, sister.
And Wanda, thank you so much for having us.
Oh, you're quite welcome. Thank you so
All
much for
right.
joining us today. It was wonderful.
Take care.
Are you too? Peace and blessings.
Peace and blessings, sis.